Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this session. We welcome expert consultant Diane Danzebrink to facilitate this next session, Menopause and Mental Health, and she's being joined on the stage by Susan G. from Yorkshire Water and Katie Taylor from Latte Lounge. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you here to discuss menopause and mental health in the workplace. It's particularly important because it affects everybody, not just women, it affects men too. I'm delighted to be facilitating this session for two reasons. One, because it's something that we really do need to talk about. And secondly, because my own personal menopause story is what's led me here today. My own menopause experience got me to the point where I considered taking my own life. And that is extremely, thankfully, that is still quite rare to hear people say things like that around menopause. But the more I work with it, the more I realize the mental health impacts. So it's important to know that every woman will experience a menopause. 1 in 4 will have very few symptoms. 3 out of 4 will experience symptoms. And 1 in 4 will experience what are described as debilitating symptoms. So affecting their quality of life in some way, shape or form. We currently have more women over 50 in the workplace than we've ever had. We've had an exponential rise since 1994, a 72% rise since 1994. So we have, we have an awful lot more women over 50 years old in the workplace. And so consequently, we have a lot more women in the workplace who are going through their menopause in the workplace. I think, one of the things that we need to look at is how we support those women. For example, the NHS, over 70% of NHS staff are women. The average age of them is 43. In my work, I'm either working with businesses and organisations, helping them to understand menopause and how they can support women in the workplace. But the other part of it is that I work with women individually. And in my own personal practice, so far, in the last few months, I've counselled 5 NHS nurses who have all left the workplace because of a lack of support within their organisation. So I don't know what NHS everybody else is looking at, but the one that I'm looking at can't afford to lose NHS nurses at that rate. So I'm going to turn now to the lovely Katie Taylor. And Katie is going to talk to us a little bit about your own experience. So Katie, how did your own experience of menopause manifest for you? And specifically, how did it affect you within your work life?
Well, I was 43 years old, so I'm 49 now. I've got 4 kids, and I was looking to go back to work. And I used to work in the charity PR and marketing sector. And I went back to work, ironically, for a mental health charity.
Okay.
Very, very busy, working, sort of part-time, but full-time part-time. And also, running a home and looking after my kids. And after about 6 months there, I just felt the only way I can describe it is I felt flat. I just was like that. And I'm always a person that's sort of very upbeat and outgoing, and I felt flat. I actually felt I needed to leave the job because I thought, well, obviously I can't cope with having 4 kids, running a home and working. Yeah. And they were fantastic. They gave me as much time off as I wanted, and they were amazing because they're a mental health charity, but I decided it was too embarrassing to go back, so I just left. Mm-hmm. I then started feeling like I literally had no joy in life. Never put it down to menopause because I was 43, and I assumed that happened to women who were over 50, and I was still having periods. So I just thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm just not a coper. So I went to my GP and said, look, I feel flat, I've got no joy for life, I feel like I'm walking through treacle, I don't seem to be able to hold down a job, maybe I should just stop. And he said, well, you're depressed, and stuck me on some antidepressants. Have some time off and then go back to work. So I took,
menopause was not mentioned?
Menopause wasn't mentioned
at all. Perimenopause
Nothing.
was not mentioned?
Nothing. Not had even heard of that word.
Okay.
Had a few months at home and thought, right, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm not the sort of person that does nothing. Applied for another job and worked for another charity for about 2 years. But then other symptoms started happening. So I got brain fog. I'd go into a meeting and I'd just have total brain fog. It was like I couldn't quite think what I wanted to say. I then was very teary. I just sort of felt like every time anyone said anything, I'd go into a meeting and I just feel like I wanted to cry. It was just really embarrassing, and I just thought, well, I just can't work. Obviously, I'm just, you know, my husband said he'd support me, and I gave up that job, and these were 2 amazing jobs.
Right.
I went back to the GP, and then I said, I'm starting to feel anxious, I've got anxiety, I'm having panic attacks, I just, you know, and no one had ever still mentioned menopause.
Yeah.
So I went off for brain scans. I thought I was having dementia because I couldn't think straight.
Yep.
I had heart tests because I had heart palpitations. Antidepressants just made me feel like that. And then went for a 3rd job. You know, yet again, I thought, well, maybe being at home is not good for me. I was sleeping all the time. And it was at this point where I was getting very heavy periods suddenly. So I was sleeping a lot. And the doctor said, well, actually, you're now anemic because, you know, you're having very heavy periods. And by then I was 43, 45, about 46. And I actually went round to my father, who's a breast cancer surgeon. He's retired now, and I just burst out crying. I said, Dad, I'm wasting my life. I just 4 years of this. I just don't know. Am I going mad? What's wrong with me? And it was then, would have been helpful if he'd said it 4 years before, but he said, you know what, I want you to go to, he was working at UCH, he said, go and see a gynecologist at UCH, a hormone specialist.
Yep.
Half an hour of her asking my symptoms, and she said, oh, it's obvious, you've got perimenopause.
And this was the first time anybody had mentioned
and
that.
it took 4 years to get to that. And I said, well, what is that? You know, I'm not menopausal, I'm having periods. And she said, you've got classic symptoms of, you know, brain fog, anxiety, low mood, depression, walking through treacle, not, you know, brain fog. I want you to start on HRT.
How did you feel about that, Katie?
It was like a light bulb moment.
Okay.
I actually said, are you serious? All these things have an explanation. I'm not going mad. I actually thought I had dementia. I thought that was it. I was terrified there was something wrong with me. She said, no, it's classic. So she said, come back and see me in a couple of months. And I went back to see her in a couple of months, and I literally got my life back. Yep. I came off the antidepressants, and I was like a new woman. And I felt really angry. I felt really, really angry. And that light bulb moment made me come home, and I lay on my bed. I remember it really well. And I turned to Facebook. And there were lots of Facebook groups for sort of mums with young kids, but they were all talking about nappy rash and buggies. And I wanted to talk about, you know, kind of a midlife woman and what, you know, and did anyone else feel the same?
Yeah.
And 2,000 women that night felt the same. So I spent 48 hours approving Facebook members. And now, where are we? 2.5 years later, we've got about 14,000 women over 40. We talk about all things midlife. And a lot of the stuff that comes up is that women want to work, they want to go back to work, but they don't feel supported at work, they feel embarrassed to discuss their symptoms. And whether it's because I think us midlife women, we juggle everything and we don't look after ourselves. And when we're not coping, we blame it on everything else. But it's very rare that we actually look at, you know, what's wrong with us. So,
what do you wish you'd have known, Katie?
I wish 3 things. I wish I'd known the word perimenopause and that it might happen after the age of about 40. I wish my GP had sat me down on that first day and said, hang on a minute, we've got a woman, she's 43, she's crying, she's got brain fog, she's got anxiety. Let me just ask her about her periods. No one asked that. And I wish I hadn't been put on antidepressants, and I wish I hadn't left those 3 jobs.
And talking of the job specifically,
Yeah.
what is it that might have helped you within those workplaces? Is there anything that you would, you would like to have had?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think I would have loved to have had a woman my age who knew about perimenopause and menopause, who actually, whether she was my boss or line manager or whatever, had just said, before you take some time off, just come and have a chat with me, and then ask me those questions. And actually, if she had said, before you give in your notice, you can have as much time off as you like, but just go and ask your doctor about this, and maybe give me some leaflets, because that light bulb moment would have saved me a lot of aggro.
So essentially having somebody to talk to who understood what you were going through and who could signpost you.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty simple stuff, isn't it?
It is, actually. And I'm really impressed with all the guys who are here. There's a lot of guys here, and I'm really, I want to applaud you all for coming, because a lot of the problem is that us, men are embarrassed by talking about, girly stuff. And I think if we can educate the men that actually we're not just all sort of hormonal nightmare women. There is a reason we're feeling like this.
No, and I think, what Katie says is absolutely true. For women, at no point are we taught about menopause. So how on earth are men supposed to understand? Because they're not going to go through it. So if we don't understand, and you heard there from Katie, sort of how important it is. That's somebody. That was one of our microphones, sorry. You heard from Katie how important it is to have the knowledge, because knowledge is power. It allows you to be able to make some decisions for yourself. Now, Susan, this must have been really resonating with you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Susan G. Susan is the occupational health lead for Yorkshire Water. So this must have really been resonating with you because of what you've been doing within your organisation. Can you tell us where the idea came from for you to start doing some work around menopause?
Well, what we'd committed to as an organisation, we've got a wellbeing strategy, which is not unusual. And part and parcel of that is that we've committed to putting all of our managers, all of our people leaders through a 2-day mental health first aid course. And some of the themes that were coming up through doing that were issues around women reporting mental health symptoms and questioning whether or not that might be to do with the menopause. It was an issue I was aware of, and it was certainly coming up in occupational health, and not necessarily always in a positive way. So one of the things that we were seeing were women who were maybe had gone from being performing, I don't say to absolutely not performing, but then women who were very confident, and I work in the water industry, and despite it might sound like it's not an exciting industry, it's actually really fascinating. So there's lots of scientists and there's lots of really clever women and men, but so these women are going from really performing to struggling and weeping and can't think what they're going to say in meetings and all this kind of thing.
So you're seeing a significant
So we're
change.
seeing people then getting referred to occupational health because they're struggling. And we also have a system where people can self-refer. So they can refer in confidence. And that was revealing in itself, because people sort of, it's a bit like Field of Dreams. You build it and they come. And they sort of crept towards it. And they were coming to speak to us about it. For me, I was thinking about what do we need to do, but the heavens kind of lined up for me, thank goodness. And I was approached by a company called VMG Associates, a lady called Margaret Wood, who's actually in the audience today. And Margaret was lobbying Parliament to look at the impact of the menopause on mental health in the workplace and what should be done. And it was all linked up with discrimination and equal pay and lots of things that have been on the agenda. And just at the same time, an employee came to see me and she said, I really want to do something because I'm really struggling. I've been to my GP. That hasn't been particularly helpful. That's not to say they weren't entirely helpful, but not particularly helpful. And I thought, wow, great. So I organised a meeting and I met up with Margaret, and Margaret put the submission into Parliament to look at that. At the same time, ACAS then had started to develop a toolkit, and they wanted a big employer to try that out with. So they used us.
Right.
And I'd like to give the young lady who run the group, Deborah Muldrig. She was our employee representative, and Deborah picked it up, ran with Margaret, and off we went. So from that, what have we actually done? I suppose that's what you want to know.
Yeah, what are the kind of some of the takeaways?
So the
that people
takeaways
can-
are, what we did is, we hooked up with a company called Henpicked, so we've developed a video. It's actually...
In fact, we're going to see
See
a
that?
minute. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
going to
just
see a
1 minute
minute
of
of
it.
that. Any moment, maybe now?
Let's talk about the menopause. Menopause, it's always been around, so why do we need to talk about it now? If we go back in time, say to the 1900s, women tended to menopause at 57 and died at 59. Today, on average, women reach menopause at around 51, live to be 82, and work until their late 60s. In fact, around 7 or 8 out of 10 menopausal women are still in work. This is a natural phase in every woman's life, but with 3 out of 4 experiencing menopausal symptoms and 1 in 4 serious symptoms, it's not an easy transition for all. By talking about it openly, no more taboo, and with the right help and support, we can improve that. And it's not something just women need to know about. Everyone does. Whether it's you personally, or you're playing a vital role being there for a partner, family member, friend, or colleague. Menopause is a natural stage in every woman's life. That is usually defined as when a woman has not had a period for 12 months. The following day is classed as menopause. Perimenopause is the time leading up to menopause, during which a woman may start to notice changes. Postmenopause is the time after menopause. When we talk about menopausal women, we mean those in perimenopause or postmenopause.
So how's that been received?
It's been received very well. We've put that on our intranet. So what we did do just prior to that was Deborah. We put together a menopause self-help group. So we advertised it across our organisation and said, right, ladies, if you'd like, and we did exclude men to start with. They're not excluded now, but they were just because lots of women were really anxious about it. We said, right, ladies, if you want to come and talk about this, then we're going to have a meeting. So I've got to confess, the first meeting was just me and Deborah. So we had a bit of a moan. I said, well, I'm on day 2 of my HRT patch. Where are you in your cycle? And then we couldn't remember what we were talking about. No, I'm joking. Goldfish moments. But actually, the next meeting, we had about 15 women turned up, some of them. And what we did was we encouraged people to share their story, but there was no need to disclose. You didn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
They could just come.
Yeah.
So that's what we started with. We've since developed a menopause toolkit and a policy. We're getting there with the policy.
Yeah.
We're looking to make it part of manager training, so it's a mandatory part of it, so people are inducted with it.
And will that all be part of you creating a culture where it's normalised?
It's just normalised. So we've now got men that have been interested in it. We've put articles on. We've had... We're lucky enough to work with a number of doctors in the region who have got special interests in menopause. So they've been in and talked to the group. We've had a lady who did mental health toughness questionnaires, like a psychometric testing, to help people build resilience skills. So she came in and did one-to-ones. We funded that so that people could get an understanding about who they are. We've got loads of resources on our intranet, links to. There's a WhatsApp menopause group, which people can just put funny things on, or just have a general moan about things if you like. But
and are these things being well utilised? Are they?
Very well utilised.
Yeah,
So now the group meets every month. As a result of doing the toolkit, we actually presented to ACAS in Birmingham in September. And normally what happens, of course, is I'm head of occupational health, so they asked me to go along and talk about it. But one of the things that's really embedded it is I wanted to give the women a voice. So I asked Deborah to go and present, which she found a bit nerve-wracking. She did really, really well. But I think it's important, if you're going to get these employee groups going, that the credit for where they lie. So I've got to give Margaret credit, but also Deborah. So she went and did it. As a result of that, it got quite a lot of interest. So she went and did it again for NASA in Leicester. Yeah. And as a result of that, Margaret's doing some more work, and International Women's Day now looking at this. So considering really it's only a year ago since we first had a conversation about what could we do. This group's now well established. They're, you know, they meet up. What they talk about, who knows? I don't go to every meeting. Yep. On another positive, as a result of that group, we've now set up a group for mothers who are returning to work, women who are pregnant, women who are experiencing, you know, the whole anxiety about coming back to work. And also a group for women who and men who are going through IVF and the difficulties that brings. But what we're doing is they're all employee-led groups. Yeah. So they're not owned by occupational health. We have an oversight of them and an overview, and I think that's really because obviously in the workplace you're bringing together people. There's an ethical issue around, you know, I don't believe that everything needs to be led by nurses and doctors, because I think there's some fantastic ideas by people who are just massively enthusiastic. I've got to say that some of our employees have been far more enthusiastic than I could have been at times about the menopause issues. So, you know, if I was going to say to you, what do you want to do in your own workplaces? I think what's really important is to ask people, what do you want? Is to move it from a health needs assessment point of view. You know, it's all well and good saying, well, you know, would yoga help? And it probably would. Yeah. And as fabulous as I look in Lycra, I'm not going to get into 3 ounces of it at lunchtime with anybody. So I think, you know, what you need to do is you need to ask people, what do you want to do? Yep. And have the courage to give them and also give it time, because it takes a little bit of time actually to just get it bedded down and people to get confidence that it will be confidential and that it will help, and also that everything can't be done in the lunchtime either, by the way. No. So you get lots of that, you know, can't they do it in the lunchtime? No, they can't. Can they do it after work? No, they can't, because they're all going home to 4 kids and a husband, really, and you know. And shopping and all the usual things that women are
That's really
packed
interesting
out with.
Because that's something that you see a lot of with the group, with the Latte Lounge. So Katie has it's a Facebook group, as she said, but it's for women over 40, and it's looking, whilst menopause it's certainly featured, hasn't it? Yeah. You also see a lot of other questions and concerns and worries on there, which are very much about women being part of a sandwich generation.
Yeah, and the whole purpose of the group and why I've now set up a website is because this midlife generation, we look after so many people and we don't look after ourselves. So we're looking after our kids, we're looking after our husbands, we're looking after my new dog, we're looking after my parents, and actually this menopause or perimenopause comes crashing in. And actually, if you can't cope, I couldn't function. Yep. So I wasn't looking after anyone that needed me at all. Yep. And I think I've actually built now, I'm constantly building a medical advisory committee and team of advisors like Diane here to support me, to support everyone else, you know, because I'm on this group, my God, I mean, 6 a.m. till midnight, and I get thousands of private messages in and talk about mental health. I mean, my mental health is getting affected because I'm trying to help so many women virtually. And
but it does show what the need is.
There's a massive need, and there's a lot of women that post anonymously because actually they don't know where to go. So I feel this huge sense of responsibility that I need to be signposting them to people like you, to my doctors, and we've got people writing blogs on everything, you know, how to cope in work, and so it's a vast,
And one of the things that I hear in my work, but also one of the things that I see on your group very often are comments like, I feel so alone,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's somewhere to have that outlet, isn't it?
It is,
And
and
where
to not-
you can
yeah.
find some support.
And just feel that you're not alone, you're not going mad. And also, one of the things I didn't say was, I never had hot flushes. Most people think that is the only symptom. I didn't have that. So I just assumed, and the doctor said, well, you don't have hot flushes, so you're fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, these support groups are great. And Diane also has a Facebook group, the Menopause Support Network. And what I try and do is when people need a lot more detail and help is actually get them to join your group so that you can support them. Because people come to us for everything. Yeah. So.
But it's, you know, sort of, how is it, in a few words, how has this whole experience, how has it affected you? What's been the result of it? What would be your kind of key takeaways for any women sitting in the audience thinking, actually, I might be feeling a bit like that?
I mean, it's completely changed my life and direction because I've now set up, I mean, I've had to set it up as a business because I'm working full time and I now need to try and earn some money to be able to pay other people to support all these women. But I just wish there was a tick list, which you actually gave me. I think it was the Women's Health Forum has this tick list of symptoms, and actually it's on my website and it's on your website and on my Facebook group, just to say, if you're feeling this, you know, and that's a very simple thing at work for any line manager to say, you know what, you know, come here for 2 minutes, just take this to your doctor. That would have been enough for me.
Yeah, would have been a start.
It would have been a massive start, yeah.
Susan, so listening to everything that, I mean, you've achieved a huge amount in a year.
Thank you.
And obviously obviously it's been, as you say, the stars aligned with your staff member who came and said, I really want to do something about this. For you, how do you see the way forward for your organisation, but more widely with what you've learnt? What would you advise to other HR directors or OH managers who are here? What would be your takeaway for them?
Simply to start by asking the question, because I think the fact is that lots of women are interested in this, and equally lots of men. I think if you look at occupational health, at the end of the day, we're looking at workplace, there's a sound business case for doing this, because as you referred to start with, more women are now working for longer because they need to do. You know, there's a huge amount of resource there in the workplace that you don't want to be losing. You know, people leaving jobs when they absolutely don't need to do with a few tweaks. I think, so the business case is absolutely there. And people do worry about, well, how am I going to do this? You know, it's going to cost a lot of money. How will I see a return on investment? But actually, if you utilise the very people who are probably suffering and right in front of you, you'll find actually that they probably can do a much better job than your occupational health can.
A lot of the things you've spoken about are very low cost.
They are.
You know, sort of setting up a support group within the workplace, having, you know, sort of a WhatsApp group. A lot of those things do not take a huge amount of resource.
And I think the other thing about it is ultimately, if you look at the wider public health agenda, what we've talked about today at the conference, which is about how are employers going to help to impact on society so that, you know, people can be economically viable, because we know that good work is good for people. Helping women stay in the workplace is absolutely crucial, and this is a really easy, effective and low-cost way of doing so. But if you want to spend a little bit of money, Margaret Wood, VMG Associates, is available, as is my two lovelies here.
So I think, you know, sort of it's time, if anybody's got any questions, we've got some questions, we're happy to take some questions from you. What have we got? Let's spin around here.
I've got my glasses on.
Okay, so what are some of the solutions? Well, I hope that you've got a few ideas. External resources to help with research. The Faculty of Occupational Medicine have produced a fabulous 4-page document, really simple. It's got advice for employers and advice for employees, downloadable from their website. Where else are we? How can you deal with severe menopausal insomnia, which severely affects day-to-day functionality? Any thoughts,
We've
Katie?
actually got one of our, well, they're not medical, well, they are actually. We have a sleep expert on the Latte Lounge who actually talks quite a lot about that. But that can often be a symptom, and something, you know.
Flexible working.
Yeah.
Flexible working policies, lots of, you know, it's to be smart about, at the end of the day, most of the time, apart from people who've actually got to be in a particular place at a particular time, most people can be flexible. So particularly where you've got knowledge workers, it's the knowledge that you want, whether they're sitting in the pyjamas having a bit of a bad day in their own kitchen or sitting in an office.
Yeah.
It's about being smart about when people work and where they work, I think.
Yeah, and I think the question around positive information, there is actually a lot of good information out there. I would signpost you to places like the British Menopause Society, have a great website, Women's Health Concern, which is the patient arm of the British Menopause Society, has a lot of information. So there's information that you could use as employers, but also information that you could signpost your team members to. And the thing that I would say out of everything that we've heard is that menopause is so much more than hot flushes. It doesn't just affect women, it affects all of us. And at the moment, employers are losing good, valuable members of staff. We think, looking at recent surveys, 1 in 4 women considers leaving the workplace because of her menopausal symptoms. And that's generally because for most women, their anxiety and, you know, sort of psychological rather than physical. A lot of women never have a hot flush. And we know that 1 in 10 women actually do leave the workplace. So I hope it's given you some food for thought. Thank you to Katie and to Susan. Thank you for listening.
Thanks.